Bellefontaine dates from 1849, but parts of it suggest a time long before that, of which the city proper no longer has any other visible record but this one. Manuel Lisa was the fur trader and businessman who settled in the French village Laclede laid out, made trading trips up the Missouri to the Yellowstone, was one of those who founded the fur trade and the first wave of prosperity that turned the village into a town and then a city. In the same colonial outpost, there were other families. They shared the same changes and hazards. On the highest hill, the memorial to William Clark faces east toward his birthplace in Virginia. Away from the river, he explored with Meriwether Lewis, going up the Missouri westward and on over the divide to the Pacific to the mouth of the Columbia. A 3-year journey, 1803 to 06. He lived on in St. Louis for many years, was territorial governor of Missouri for 7 years, and with Indians still about, was superintendent of Indian affairs until 1838. A venerable gentleman by then, the Lewis and Clark expedition having become a legend in his own lifetime. His family had flourished, and his sons bore the names of the president who ordered his expedition and the friend with whom he shared its leadership. A nephew, Colonel O'Fallon, gave his name to a city street and land for a city park, and much of his fortune to a Polytechnic Institute that eventually became part of Washington University. Memorials were often fashioned then to suggest a career and its high point for generals, businessmen, and seafaring men like Commander Wilson McGanigal. Another military figure was also an almost legendary man of medicine, Dr. William Beaumont. An army surgeon, his famous patient was a soldier suffering from a severe stomach wound. The doctor kept the man alive by fashioning a window over the wound in 1823, and through this he made detailed observations for 10 years that resulted in new knowledge about the processes of digestion. He practiced in St. Louis and taught medicine. The first American governor of California, General Richard Mason, he wrote army treatises on artillery. Sherman was his adjutant, and said that from him he learned how to manage guns in the field. Captain Sellers made his first river trip in 1811, became the most famous of the steamboatmen plying between St. Louis and New Orleans, used the name Mark Twain before another riverman did, and the other Mark Twain called him the patriarch of the piloting craft. Captain Shreve designed the steamboat Washington in 1816 and shortened the time from Louisville to New Orleans to 26 days, gave his name to Shreveport. The monument to General Sherman is in Calvary Cemetery. He made his home in St. Louis in retirement. Left the place for good, he said, after an argument with a city official over his water bill. His little son, whom he had hoped would follow his own calling, was a victim of typhoid after the Vicksburg campaign with Grant. The Blow family has given a name to schools and a library. Its founder was a senator and a congressman, minister to Brazil under President Grant, His daughter organized the nation's first kindergarten at Des Peres School in 1873. The city was larger, it was prosperous. The catalog of funerary art became elaborate and ornamental, as did the city itself. Its memorials were the work of European sculptors, as well as newcomers, who came to ply their craft. They came to memorialize a leadership that grew in influence. In Greek and Roman forms, it expressed its sense of its magnitude. Along the bluffs above the river, a second city rose, that from the view below, at a distance, had the outlines of the ancient world. It was a boulevard of grandeur and some repetition. But it leads to one structure that some architects regard as one of the most interesting and important works, not only in St. Louis, but on the North American continent. For Ellis Wainwright, Louis Sullivan had designed a building at 7th and Chestnut. For Wainwright's beautiful young wife, he designed a tomb. As his building was wholly original for its time, so was this. In Bellefontaine Cemetery, it has been studied by architects and photographed by visitors from all over the world. In a world sense, the Wainwright tomb is St. Louis's most famous design, embellished by Sullivan once again with his unique system of ornament, which would suggest, he hoped, the permanence of life. Among the Greek and Roman forms around it, Sullivan's design stood alone, as did his building downtown. It was a semi-sphere on a perfect cube, but adding to these things its own combinations of ornament and shadow and sunlight. After 70 years, the largest number of visitors still pauses here. In the old cemeteries, their number is rarely large. Yet here the city has documented its people and their fortunes, perhaps more eloquently than anywhere else. Its 200-year past is silent, and it speaks.